Hello everyone, and welcome to a different view of my apartment. If you're not able to guess, potentially from the layout what's going on here, or maybe the title, because let's be real, that's often an indicator of the content, I thought I would do a bookshelf tour. In January 2020, I would say that I had read about 75% of the books on my shelves. I was doing really well, I was keeping on top of it. And then, due to family incidents, I inherited a lot of books. At this point, I'd say realistically, I've only read like maybe 40% of what's on my shelf. It's a work in progress, okay? So the bookshelves I have are the Kallax from IKEA. I upgraded from a Billy, like a basic bitch, and I got these bad boys. Normally during the day we have this mirror in front of it, which I found in the trash room of my apartment building, which I thought was amazing. I obviously cleaned it down, and for the sake of this video, it got moved out the way. What I really like about this one is the fact it's got all these nooks. I personally organise all of my books by genre, and then I alphabetise them within. It also means that there are separate sections, so like my housemate can put his books there. We've got this thing that's full of linen. And then finally, I have all these post-it notes on the top to try and help me keep track of who I have lent books to. So the first shelf we're going to touch on is actually one of my least read shelves. Sorry to everything that's going on here. This is my non-fiction and my feminist shelf. This actually isn't alphabetized because it's just a hot mess. Books I want to give a shout out to include Nimco Ali's What We're Told Not to Talk About, but we're going to anyway. The thing with this one, I'm like halfway through it, and I think the thing with a lot of non-fiction feminist books that I have on the shelf is they're like a collation of... Collation? Is that a word? I don't think so. There's so many like individual essays, letters, like I also have on here, feminists don't wear pink, I call myself a feminist, everyday sexism, women on top. Like there are a lot of books which are essentially just essays or writings put together, and I personally can't sit and just read all of that in one go, so I am technically halfway through this one. Also, I think the cover's sick as frick. But I also haven't actually read anything from it in about a year. So, does it have any right to be on my currently reading list on Goodreads? No. Is it anyway? Yes. This has a lot of talk about Nimco Ali's experiences with FGM, and this takes a global look at different feminist structures, and it's essays from people worldwide. So like 4 sections that are spoken about are periods, orgasms, pregnancy, and the menopause. And first off, like any books to talk about menopause I think are really important because feminism often seems to cut off a certain age group, at least white feminism does. It's important to recognise areas where we need to improve, right? That's what feminism's all about. Your fight might be over, the world's fight is not over. Read books by women of colour if you can, and this one I just think is a really good, like, I was like doing a birthing thing, and that was gross. Like a little entryway into the wider picture. Also, if you don't know anything about FGM, look it up. It's horrific, and it's one that has often been put on the back burner by a lot of people because they go around saying, well, it's not our culture, so what do we know? Well, here we have a writer who is part of that culture saying it's not okay. Yeah. Last book I want to talk about on the shelf, New Erotica for Feminists. If I was someone that owned a coffee table, I would have this on my coffee table because it is so funny. So it's basically these 4 friends that wrote a bunch of really short snippets of things that would get feminists going, I guess. So an example is, I get catcalled on the street by a construction worker. He says he can see I'm smart because I have enormous books. He tells me he's reading the latest Zadie Smith novel. I invite him to join my book club and spend all night fantasising about his insightful commentary on non-linear plot structure. Whew. So it's a bunch of stuff like that. It's feminist fantasies that in reality aren't sexual but are framed in a way that comes across like it's definitely going to be a bit hot under the collar, and not just because we're having a crazy May where the sun is out all the time. This never happens in Manchester. I'm glad it's happening when we're all inside. So the next shelf I have is dystopian fiction. And this is probably my favourite shelf and also the one I've read the most of. Maybe. We might be moving on to that next. It's all comparative. I'm sure editing Leah will let you know. Honourable mention that is currently missing from the shelf is Never Let Me Go by Kazu Ishiguro. If you haven't read that, oh my god, it is so beautiful. I think it's probably the book I've read the most. It is getting a little bit damaged at this point, so it's kind of peeling weirdly, but I just don't treat my books very well. But that's how you know they're loved, you know? Is that okay? I don't know. Why am I giving these guys justification? Anyway, so what we have, dystopian. Flowers for Algernon, I think, is a really, really good book. It's just so clever and really sad. It's basically about a floor sweeper who was born with a very low IQ, and then these doctors are doing experiments on rats, and then they turn to human trials to see if you can increase someone's intelligence. And through the book, his intelligence increases and it kind of changes who he is, how he gets on with people, how he's viewed in society and stuff like that. But then the rat that was a huge success story starts to deteriorate, and then Charlie, at the peak of his intelligence, has to do everything he can to try and make sure that doesn't happen to him. It is, it's so good. And one time a customer actually came into the shop that I work in and said, he says that he buys this book and gives it to his friends, so in reality he's probably bought this book like 7 or 8 times because he doesn't want to just lend it out to people and then get it back. He wants them to have it and treasure it and love it. And you know when you just want to cry a little bit because that's one of the most beautiful things, and I wish I was in a place where I could financially buy my friends all of the books I loved so they could love it too. It was just really cute, okay? Okay, and then the last one for the top row we have is my Japanese translated fiction. At first, I used to just have all translated fiction together, but then I kept acquiring Japanese specific translated fiction, and also in January, as I say, I inherited a lot of books, a lot of them included European translated fiction authors. So this has got its own shelf. Truth be told, a lot of it is Murakami, of one variety or another. I have read Rue Murakami in the Miso Soup. I thought that book was stupid as hell. It was, I don't know, it was meant to be like a crime thing, but the whole time you knew the guy, like this isn't a spoiler, within like the first 10 pages, the guy knew that he was showing around a murderer. And I don't know, I thought the book was stupid as hell. So I'm sticking with Haruki Murakami, but he also is a bit hit and miss for me sometimes. So don't let him put you off all Japanese authors. Some of them are banging, some of them are weird as hell. Honourable mentions include the Nakano Thrift Store. I spoke about this in my reading rush because I intended to, and then I did read it, reread it. Read it twice now. I really like Hiromi Kawakami. I think she might be my favourite Japanese author. Her stories are a little bit quirky. Strange Weather in Tokyo, I couldn't finish. I started it and I was just like, this is too much for my tiny little brain to handle right now. So I ignored it. But this one was really cool because it was just a bunch of, you're following one character and like her life. Well, not her life, it's like a year. But it has a bunch of like little episodes going on in between, which I thought was really cute. It feels like a story that reminds you don't have to just stick with your own family. You can choose your family a little bit. The people around you and the people that you see every day and the people that care about you and want what's best for you can be your family just as much as your biological family. That's what I took from it, and also the issues with the co-worker thing, but that feels like a life lesson for another day. Other than that, we have, as I say, a bunch of Murakami books. I have read about half of the ones on the shelf. If I had to pick a favourite, I would say South of the Border, West of the Sun was my favourite. It was one of his shorter ones. It was one of his less magical realism ones. I did read, and I do have on this shelf, Killing Commendatore. I have the hardback. Can you see it? Isn't that cool? Like, except also it's freaking huge. So reading it took ages because I could never take it to work and read it at work. So I just had to read it here, or every now and then I would borrow the paperback that was on offer in the store, and then I would just read that. This was dumb as hell. Like, this was one of his more boring ones. I would not recommend you waste your time with this unless you are one of those people that just likes to read everything by an author ever. Very pretty, lovely book, not good enough reason to ramble on for like 700 pages and make no points whatsoever. You know, when you're just like, why did I waste the time reading that? That's how I felt after reading this one. But he has some other good ones, so it's hit and miss. It depends what you're looking for, I guess. And now we're on to the second section of the shelf. You will notice I've ignored something. These are all Jacob's books. These are the only, apart from the Harry Potter series, these are the only books he has out at the moment, which are mostly cooking books and a couple of travel books. As I say, very lucky to have a housemate that is fine with me just putting this huge piece of furniture and all of this random crap in the living room. Okay, so this is my general translated fiction. This I don't really have the clearest structure with. It's kind of done by like part of the world and then alphabetized, but even that is very patchy. So honorable mention that is currently missing, A Man Called Ove, which is a Swedish book. It is wonderful, and to be honest, it is almost identical to Hotel Silence. I read this first, and I'm glad I read this one, then that one. A Man Called Ove is better, I hate to say it. So I would have been a bit gutted to have read like the really good one and then the less good one. But they're very similar. So this is about an old man who wants to kill himself. Kind of similar to A Man Called Ove. And then basically they find people that need them for minor tasks, little like day-to-day living situations. In this one, he goes out to he doesn't want anyone at home to find him when he kills himself, so he goes out to a war zone country, an unnamed war zone country, stays in this hotel and intends to hang himself in this hotel, but then the two people that own the hotel are like, oh, you've got an electric drill. We could do with a little bit of handiwork. Do you mind like helping us out? And he's like, oh, sure, whatever. And then he goes around the town and, oh, the restaurant needs a little bit of help with some like manual labor. Could you help out? Stuff like that. And yeah, in A Man Called Ove, he doesn't go somewhere else, but people move into his town. In that one, he basically wants to kill himself because his wife has died and he doesn't really see the point in going on without her. And he's really grumpy and horrible to everyone in the neighborhood. They just think he's like this stuck in his ways, like miserable old coot that just don't know how to act. But then this pregnant lady and her husband and her daughter move in, and she is insistent that he help her with so much. Her husband very early on falls off a ladder and breaks his leg, so she deems him useless and calls on Ove to help her out. Another, I guess, I'm gonna pair them together even though maybe I shouldn't. I went through a phase when I very first got back into reading when I was like 19, being really interested in North Korean defectors and people that have escaped North Korea and their stories. So I have currently lent out to my friend Jim a book called In Order to Survive by Yeonmi Park, which is probably like the most well-known story. I have two more on my shelf. I have read Girl with Seven Names. I have not read Dear Leader. This one as well, I don't know why I haven't read this because this sounds great. It's about someone that was an officer within the intelligence branch of government. I was going to call them a committee, but there's a bigger word for that. Also, something I think is so, I don't know, it's wild, and I only learned about this since I started reading books like this. North Korea puts out this idea that people that write these books have never been to North Korea. They are not North Korean. What they are American raised
or their pictures are used for imagery to basically besmirch North Korea. Like, they have this conspiracy that No Defector book is really written by someone that's ever left North Korea, because people would never want to leave North Korea because it's so amazing. But they are written by Americans in order to, bring down this wonderful image of North Korea. And as soon as you think that, you like, if you read one of them and then you start thinking that and then you read another one, you're like, this is crazy, because obviously it's not true. But part of you wants to believe it is true for the drama, or maybe that's just me. But this genre, this sub-collection, I don't know what you'd call it, so good. So interesting to read. And now we enter general fiction. This is where a lot of books I haven't actually read fall under. So aside from the nondescript pot of Sharpies, we have A through to I on this shelf. I've read 5 of the books on this shelf. Whoops. So in reality, the ones I'm shouting out are Coraline. Yes, it's a kid's book. Yes, it's weird as hell. The movie's brilliant. The book is great. Homegoing, also a really good book. This one was cool because it followed generations, and I'm a bit hit and miss when books do that. So it's following 2 sisters, one of whom is sold into the slave trade and the other who goes on to marry a slave trader. And like how they started in the same place, these 2 sisters, and then how their offspring go on in life, and then their kids go on in life, and their kids and their kids, and it like just follows those down. Really cool. I think it's definitely a book that you need to read pretty quickly though, so you don't forget who's who, what's what, where everything's going. But that might also just be because I have a terrible attention span. And now we're on to the penultimate level, and let me tell you, I'm sat in a very strange way to get this angle. This shelf is primarily my Japanese books, not translated fiction. For those of you that didn't know, at my undergrad I did Japanese language alongside my course, and I'm looking at doing a master's. Cheeky cheeky, teasy teasy. So this is primarily, as I say, I've got textbook, history of Japan, but like the actual history, so it's not like a fun thing to read. Short stories, which are pretty cool to be fair. It goes like this. Can you see it? Can you see it? So you've got one page that's in English and one page that's written in text. Then we've got a book on Sadako, we've got a phrase book, we've got these, which... So I was in Japan 2 years ago, over the summer, and at the time, Cardcaptor Sakura, which when I was younger was my favourite show, not like the anime, but they used to show it on ITV1 in the morning, on a Sunday at like 7 AM. It was called Cardcaptors, not Cardcaptor Sakura. It was English, and I thought it was dope as hell. Like, I thought it was the coolest show ever. And then when I was like 15, 16, someone on Tumblr posted about it. I went, I found it, and I rewatched all of it, but in the original Japanese with subtitles. And I just thought it was cool as hell. Like, oh my gosh. And now it's just one of those things, it's just like a little nostalgia thing for me, even though I don't really I don't really watch anime or do anything like that anymore. I'm much less of a weeb than I used to be, is what I'm saying. But clearly not that much, because at the time, when I was in Japan, it was like the 20th anniversary, and they were in the process of releasing all of these new episodes of the show, and in turn they were releasing new volumes of the manga. I've never read manga before in my life. So I don't know why I decided this was something I was going to buy. I think maybe just because it's really cute. And also they were only like £2 each. When was the last time you bought anything that you could, I was going to say anything you could read? Like cereal packets, Leo, calm down. When was the last time you bought any sort of book, comic book, anything like that for £2? Amazing. So I got the first 5. They're all in Japanese with kanji. I can't read them. I would like to one day, but for now, it's just a really lovely thing to have and remind me of, wonderful trips. I think that's the thing with a lot of random ass books I have on my shelf. I like things that remind me of nicer times, even if that trip in particular was bloody awful. And then finally, for some reason on this shelf, I have Fellside and Clockwork Orange, which my friend lent me just before she went travelling, and I've tried to read it. I know the whole thing is like, wow, it's amazing. Anthony Burgess wrote his own dictionary. It's really confusing, and I don't think I care that much about reading a book just because it's like iconic literature. I don't know what it's about. I don't get it. But my friend loved it so much, and she really wanted me to read it. So I'm out myself now saying, it's been over a year, still haven't, probably never will. If you want this copy back now you're in England, let me know. Oopsie. And then on the other side of this, which is just full of tea towels, so I'm not going to show you it, we have shelf 2 of literary fiction. I don't know why I've decided to do it like this. I just have. You're just going to have to trust me. Again, on this shelf, Not Oodles has been read. And many of what has been read on here, to be fair, I think I've already spoken about. So I've already given my opinions on my year of rest and relaxation. I've already given a shout out to Anis Nin. The Lovely Bones, I need to lend to a friend. This was one of the first books I read that was like an adult book. I read it when I was like 15. I thought it was amazing. And then I lent it to my friend. And I remember her giving it back to me the next day in PE, and she said, I'm not reading this. I was like, excuse me? She was like, I just finished the first chapter, I'm not reading it. Because the story of The Lovely Bones is a girl gets murdered and no one knows who did it. No one suspects one of the neighbours in her neighbourhood, and it follows like her dad desperate to find out who did it. So in the film, you see her alive, Saoirse Ronan, running around, having a great time. And then she goes to this person that she kind of knows from the neighbourhood. So clearly he's not like a stranger, but he's saying like, oh, I've built this really cool den for like you and the kids in the neighbourhood to play in. And you're kind of like, oh, sad little Stanley Tucci, you're a loser, whatever. Do you want to come see it? And you can tell she's kind of like, I definitely shouldn't. But because she doesn't want to be rude, isn't that always a problem in women's fiction? She goes into this den and the guy murders her. In the book, he does a bit more than murder her, and it turns out recommending that kind of content to other 15-year-olds is not the way to make friends, Leah. So that was a bit much. And finally we have the last shelf on my shelves. Behind my head is my housemates' copies of Harry Potter. Didn't think they were worth mentioning because they're not my books. And also, I've never read Harry Potter. Don't shoot me. So on this shelf again, we are back in the world of literary fiction. This is very hit and miss, so we will just go through it quite quickly. The People in the Trees, which I have read. I read quite recently during lockdown. Now, Hanya Yanagihara also wrote A Little Life, and everyone tells me don't read that, it's depressing as hell. I have no idea what happens in that one. I just know it's like 900 pages, and yeah, everyone tells me it's depressing as hell. It turns out Hanya Yanagihara is quite a fan of writing books that are just a bit much. Because it sounds really cool. It's the idea that this doctor, Dr. Norton Perina, goes to an indigenous island, finds out these guys are living to be like 150, and he figures the way they do it is by eating this turtle. It's very ritualistic. The book covers a lot of really interesting topics, kind of thinks about like civilization, what do we get to count as civil, adopting children of colour into a white household, and kind of how that impacts their identity. But the overarching thing is, in the first chapter you find out he has been arrested and put to trial and found guilty of sexual assault for some of these kids he's adopted. So you go through his whole life and all of this science stuff. They skip out some of the boring stuff, thank goodness. I'm not going to give away too many spoilers, but the ending chapter of this was a bit much for me. Like, oh boyo. I don't know, I really want to talk to someone else that's read it, just to like unpack it a little bit. It was really good. It was really well written, it was really interesting. I really like fake biographies of people. This one, I don't know what to make of it. I don't know anyone I would ever recommend this book to. Other than because I wanted them to talk to me about it. I don't know. Much to think of. But that is the Why author. That is the end of the book tour. I'm not going to stand up to do the outro. I'm going to stay lying down. I've moved my sofa so I could lie down. Thank you so much for watching. Did anything on here pique your interest? I'm not showing you my final shelf because it's just random crap. It's got things like my dad's electric screwdriver that I need to give back to him on. That helped me build this very bookcase. So that is it. That's my whole shelves. That's everything I've got. As I say, many books are lent out at the moment, and I do think at some point I might give you a rundown of all the books I've lent out, because obviously I like them. I think they're good enough books that other people should read them immediately. But I hope everyone's doing okay. I've woken up in a really good mood today. It's the first good mood I've had in about 2 weeks, which is why it took a little bit longer to release this video. But hopefully I'll have more content for you soon. Because I love editing, even if filming makes me feel awkward as hell. Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, stay inside where you can. Thank you. Goodbye. Goodbye. Is this how I say goodbye now? Goodbye.